I watched my daughter-in-law humiliate our landscaper, and in that moment, I knew it was time to teach her a lesson she'd never forget. I'm 61 years old, and I thought at this stage of my life I'd seen it all. But that April morning, while sipping my coffee on the back deck of my suburban home in Atlanta, I witnessed something that made my blood boil like it hasn't in decades. Before I continue with this incredible story, please subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm sure my story will touch your heart. My name is Margaret, and this is the story of how my daughter-in-law, Brittany, learned that humility isn't taught with sweet words, but with lessons that cut deep into the soul. It all started that morning when I heard shouting from the backyard. At first, I thought it was the neighbor's TV turned up too loud, but when I recognized Brittany's shrill voice, my heart started racing. I walked over to the sliding glass door, and what I saw broke my heart. There she was, in her designer athleisure outfit and perfectly manicured nails, screaming at Thomas, our landscaper of 15 years. Thomas is a humble man, 65 years old, who has taken care of my garden for more than 15 years. He's a hardworking man with weathered hands and a kind smile, who always greets me with respect. "Good morning, Mrs. Johnson. Hope you have a blessed day." A man who has never complained, not even when my late husband paid him late, or when I, on my most difficult days, spoke to him curtly. But that morning, Brittany was treating him worse than a stray dog. "You're completely useless," Brittany was screaming, waving her arms like she owned the world. "Look at how you left the rose bushes. My mother-in-law pays your salary to do things right, not to destroy her garden." I stood there frozen, my coffee mug trembling in my hands, the scent of the honeysuckle I love so much mixed with the bitter taste of rage rising in my throat. Thomas stood there, head down, holding his old baseball cap between his hands like a scolded child. "Ma'am," he murmured in that soft voice I knew so well, "the roses are doing fine. They just need a little extra water with this heat wave we're having." "Don't you dare talk back to me," she roared at him. "I'm the one in charge here, and if you don't like how I speak to you, you can get out." In that moment, something broke inside me. It wasn't just the way she spoke to him. It was the cruelty in her eyes, the arrogance in every gesture. It was watching her trample on the dignity of a man who had dedicated years of his life to making our home beautiful. I remembered then all the times Brittany had shown that same arrogance with me. When she'd come over and criticize my cooking, "Oh, Margaret, meatloaf again!" At my house, we ate more sophisticated food. Or when she saw my clothes hanging on the line, "Don't you have money for a decent dryer? How embarrassing if the neighbors see this." I'd always justified her behavior, thinking she was young, that she came from a different family, that she needed time to adjust. My son adored her, and I didn't want to be that bitter mother-in-law who ruins marriages. But when seeing how she treated Thomas, that was the last straw. Brittany had grown up in an affluent family in Buckhead, used to being waited on hand and foot. When she married my Michael 3 years ago, I thought love had softened her, that pending motherhood would make her more human. How wrong I was. While I watched her humiliate Thomas, I remembered my own mother, who worked as a housekeeper in fancy homes to raise me after my father left us. I remembered her rough hands, her sleepless nights, and how she never complained when employers treated her badly. "Dignity isn't something you beg for, Margaret. You wear it like your finest dress," she always told me. That morning, watching Brittany destroy Thomas's dignity, I decided my mother had been right, and it was time for my daughter-in-law to learn that lesson. I waited for Brittany to leave for her Pilates class to approach Thomas. I found him watering the petunias with shaking hands, and when he saw me, he tried to smile as always. "Good morning, Mrs. Johnson," he greeted me, but his voice sounded defeated. "Thomas," I said, sitting on the wrought iron bench under the magnolia tree, "come here, we need to talk." He approached slowly, as if fearing another scolding, but when he saw tears in my eyes, His expression softened. "Oh, Thomas, please forgive me," I said, taking his weathered hands in mine. "Forgive me for not coming out to defend you when that woman was disrespecting you." He shook his head with that humility that has always characterized him. "Don't worry about it, Mrs. Johnson. I'm used to it. I've worked at many houses and I've seen everything." "Well, I'm not used to it," I replied firmly, "and I'm not going to allow anyone to treat the people I care about like that in my own home." That afternoon, after Thomas left, I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by the aroma of the pot roast I was preparing for dinner, planning my strategy. I needed Brittany to understand what it feels like to be on the other side, but I had to be smart about it. I couldn't just yell at her like she had done to Thomas, because that would make me the same thing I was criticizing. I called my sister Patricia, who lives in Charleston and has always been my advisor in difficult times. "Margaret," she told me, after hearing the whole story, "that girl needs a lesson in humility, but be careful not to hurt Michael in the process." She was right. My son adored Brittany, and even though her behavior hurt me, I didn't want to destroy his marriage. But I also couldn't just stand by with my arms crossed. That night, while preparing the apple pie that Michael loves so much, the perfect idea occurred to me. I remembered that Brittany always bragged about her culinary skills, how she had learned authentic Southern cuisine at her sorority house. She always criticized my traditional comfort food, saying it was too heavy or not refined enough. What if I give her the opportunity to show everything she knows? I thought with a mischievous smile.
The next day, when Brittany came home from her job at that upscale boutique in Lenox Square, I was waiting for her in the living room with a proposal she couldn't refuse. "Brittany," I said, with my sweetest smile, "I have a proposal I think you're going to love." She sat on the sofa with that air of superiority I knew so well, crossing her legs and looking at me as if I were a child who needed her attention. "What's this about, Margaret?" she asked, using that condescending tone that irritated me so much. "You know, I've always admired your elegance and good taste," I began, feeling the words come out sweet as honey, but with intentions sharp as a knife. "And I've been thinking it would be wonderful if you organized a dinner party for Michael's family. Something sophisticated, like you know how to do so well." Brittany's eyes lit up like a child on Christmas morning. It was exactly the reaction I expected. "Oh, what a great idea!" she exclaimed, and for the first time in a long time, I saw her genuinely excited. I could make that shrimp and grits recipe that Michael loves so much, and maybe some elegant appetizers. "Perfect," I said, feeling my plan begin to take shape. "I'll invite my sisters, the uncles, some neighbors. It'll be a beautiful celebration. Of course, I won't interfere with anything. It'll be your night to shine." Over the following days, Brittany threw herself into the preparations with an energy I'd never seen from her. She bought expensive ingredients, studied recipes on Pinterest, bragged to her friends about the dinner party she was going to host. I watched her from a distance, feeling a mixture of guilt and satisfaction that churned my stomach. "You're going to be cooking for 20 people," she told me excitedly one afternoon. "It's going to be spectacular. Everyone will see how well I cook, not like, well, the traditional food that's usually served here." That jab at my cooking confirmed I was making the right decision. But what Brittany didn't know was that I had planned something else. On the same day as the dinner party, I hired Thomas to come help with cleaning and serving. When I told Brittany, her face immediately changed. "Is that man going to be here during my dinner party?" she asked with disgust. "It's just to help with dishes and cleanup," I explained calmly. "You'll be busy entertaining the guests. You need someone to take care of those details." I saw her purse her lips, but she couldn't refuse without looking bad. After all, it was my house and I was paying for everything. The morning of the dinner party, Brittany arrived early, dressed as if she were going to a gala, wearing a designer apron that probably cost more than Thomas's monthly salary. When he arrived, punctual as always, the tension in the kitchen could be cut with a knife. "I hope you don't get in the way," she told him without even looking at him. "This is an important dinner, and I can't allow any mistakes." Thomas nodded silently and began washing the wine glasses we had taken out from the china cabinet. I stayed in the living room arranging flowers and waiting for the perfect moment to execute the second part of my plan. At 7 o'clock, the guests began to arrive. My sister Patricia came from Charleston, as she had promised. My brothers-in-law also arrived, some dear neighbors, and even Mrs. Henderson, the most elegant woman in the neighborhood, known for her refined palate and culinary critiques. Brittany was radiant, receiving compliments on her dress, on the table setting, on the aroma coming from the kitchen. I watched her shine, and for a moment, I felt sorry for what I was about to do. But then I saw her head toward the kitchen and, without anyone else hearing, hiss at Thomas, "If you break anything or ruin my dinner, I swear you'll regret it." My compassion evaporated like water in the desert. Time came to serve the shrimp and grits. Brittany emerged from the kitchen with her most radiant smile, announcing that she was going to present an authentic Southern shrimp and grits prepared with the family recipe I learned from my grandmother. The guests applauded expectantly. Thomas appeared, carrying the large serving dish with that natural elegance that experienced workers have. He placed it in the center of the table carefully and retreated discreetly to the kitchen. Brittany began serving with great ceremony. I watched the guests' faces as they tasted the first bite, and my heart filled with bittersweet satisfaction. My sister Patricia was the first to furrow her brow. Then my brother-in-law Robert quietly put his fork down on his plate. Mrs. Henderson chewed slowly, and I saw in her eyes that expression I knew so well, the polite disappointment of someone who doesn't want to hurt feelings. The grits were gritty and undercooked, but not only that, the shrimp were rubbery, the seasoning was completely off, and the overall taste was, well, it was bad. Very bad. "It's delicious," lied my cousin Eddie, but his face said the opposite. Brittany, who had been waiting for praise, began to notice the uncomfortable looks and the plates that were filling slowly. Her perfect smile began to crack like old paint. "Is everything okay?" she asked with a trembling voice. That's when I decided to act. I got up from my chair and, with the sweetest voice I could muster, said, "Brittany, dear, I think there was a small problem with the cooking time. Did you perhaps not cook the grits long enough?" Her face turned red as a tomato. All the guests were looking at her with that mixture of pity and discomfort that hurts more than any scream. I followed the recipe exactly," she stammered. That's when Thomas appeared in the kitchen doorway, discreet as always, but I called him over. "Thomas, come here, please. Did you see how Mrs. Brittany was preparing the grits?" The poor man approached nervously, looking back and forth between Brittany and me. "Tell the truth, Thomas. No one's going to scold you." In a barely audible voice, Thomas murmured, "The lady got distracted answering her phone when she was supposed to be stirring the grits, and I told her they needed more time, but she told me to mind my own business." The silence that followed was deafening. Brittany looked at me with eyes full of tears of humiliation, and for a moment I felt sorry for her again. But then I remembered how she had treated Thomas that morning in the garden, and my heart hardened once more. After that night, everything changed in our house. Brittany spent several days not speaking to me, and when she did, it was with a coldness that cut through the air. But I had achieved what I wanted. I had made her taste her own medicine. Michael, my poor son, was caught in the middle of a silent war he didn't fully understand. One afternoon, he asked me to talk privately. "Mom," he said, sitting next to me on the couch, where his father used to read the newspaper, "what really happened at that dinner? Brittany has been crying for days and won't tell me why." I sighed deeply. inhaling the scent of the gardenias coming through the open window. It was time to be honest with my son. I told him everything, what I had seen in the garden, how Brittany had humiliated Thomas, and how I had decided to teach her a lesson. Michael listened to me in silence, with that serious expression he'd had since childhood when something worried him deeply. "Mom," he said, "I understand why you did it, but don't you think there were other ways to handle this?" He was right, of course, but sometimes the most important lessons aren't learned with gentle words, but with experiences that mark the soul. A few days later, Brittany approached me while I was watering the plants on the deck. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and her hands were shaking. "Margaret," she said, in a voice very different from the one I knew, "I need to apologize to you." I put down the watering can on the table and looked into her eyes. For the first time, I saw real vulnerability in them. "Not just for the dinner," she continued, "but for everything. For how I've treated you, for how I treated Thomas, for thinking I was better than all of you." She sat on the bench where I had planned my revenge so many times, and for the first time, she spoke to me as an equal, not as an annoying mother-in-law. She confessed to me, "I grew up thinking that having money made me superior. My family always taught me that people like Thomas were there to serve us, not to be respected." But that night, seeing how everyone looked at me with pity, I understood what it feels like to be on the other side. I sat next to her, and for the first time in 3 years, we had a real conversation. "Brittany," I said, taking her hand, "we all make mistakes. What's important is learning from them and becoming better people." The next day, Brittany was the first to go out and greet Thomas when he arrived for work. She apologized to him with tears in her eyes, and since then, she has always treated him with the respect he deserves. Now, 6 months later, as I write this story sitting in my beautiful garden that Thomas tends with so much love, I can say that my plan worked better than I expected. Not only did Brittany learn humility, but our relationship strengthened in a way I never imagined possible. Sometimes she comes to ask me for traditional recipes, and I patiently teach her how to make my mother's cornbread, or the mac and cheese my husband loved so much. And when she makes mistakes in the kitchen, we don't laugh at her, we help her improve. Because that's the difference between humiliating and teaching. Humiliation destroys the soul, but lessons with love strengthen it. Thomas continues working with us, and now Brittany sometimes brings him fresh, sweet tea when it's really hot, or asks about his grandchildren. He smiles with that kindness he never lost, and I feel that my mother would be proud of how I defended the dignity of an honest worker. My son Michael is happier than ever because finally his wife and mother found a way to live together in harmony. And I've learned that sometimes to teach respect, you first have to show the consequences of the lack of it. Life has taught me that true wisdom isn't about avoiding conflicts, but about resolving them in a way that makes us all better people. And if this story touched your soul, as I hope it has, remember that it's never too late to apologize, to change, and to treat others with the dignity we all deserve. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. For the next story, click on the box to the left. Thank you for joining me on this memory that changed my life forever.